Hello, my name is Brie, and I'd like to welcome you to my YouTube channel, Breezy Banter, a place where I talk about the things I want to talk about. In today's video, I decided that I wanted to discuss the goals that I set for myself in 2024, and to also do a check-in on those goals and see whether I'm on track to accomplish them. If you watched the intro to my channel video, you might remember that I mentioned that I think creating a YouTube channel where I check in on these goals in a public-facing format is one great way that I think I can be held accountable for accomplishing these goals. So I'm going to talk about that, and you'll also see that there's a second reason as to why I decided to create a YouTube channel. So before we talk about the specific goals that I set for myself, there are a few things that I want to mention up front. I know some people hate setting goals or resolutions, but I in fact really like them. I think it's important for me to reflect on where I am in my life and where I want to go, and to find ways to bridge that gap. Goals are a great way for me to do just that. I think there can be a decent amount of stigma surrounding setting goals for oneself. There's the expectation that you're just going to fail, particularly if you set them around New Year's, which is when I tend to do this type of reflection. I tend to set goals around New Year's just because I like the 1 year time frame. That said, there are two main caveats that I'd make to this. If you don't like setting goals for a year, consider setting them for a different time frame. I watched Anna Rapari's video about setting goals for 12 weeks at a time, which I've considered doing as well. At this point in time, I'm committing to the 1 year goals that I've set for myself. That said, this might change in the future because I think there are some significant pros to setting 12-week goals or even 16-week goals. And that's something that I might want to explore in the future. Additionally, there's nothing special about January 1st. If you have a goal that you want to accomplish, there's no reason why you can't start today. In fact, I'd encourage you to start today. How are you going to get closer to the life that you want to live if you decide to wait another 7 months to start? I'd encourage you to try to rid yourself of that thinking and just go for what you want now. Also, on a more personal note, I'm someone who has historically struggled with all or nothing thinking. And for me, the way that this is manifested in my life is that I tend to be very strict with myself in terms of accomplishing my goals. And the second that there is a little setback, I forget all of my progress. So I've done a lot of reflection on this in my life, and over the past several years, I've tried to be more gentle with myself and recognize that maybe I can't go from 0 to 100, but if I can go 0 to 70, 70 is closer to 100 than 0 is. So I should recognize that in myself and be proud of what I accomplish, even if I don't necessarily accomplish all of the things that I set out to do. As part of that, as I go through the goals that I've set for myself, I'll make note that there are a handful that I'm being a bit more flexible on, simply due to life circumstances where I suspect it might be a challenge to accomplish them, but how I'm planning on addressing them in the future. So to get started, the very first goal that I set for myself was to commit to a public-facing creative project. So welcome to my YouTube channel. I considered other options as well, such as having a public-facing photography Instagram account, which I might do in the future. I also am considering streaming on Twitch. As I've mentioned, I enjoy playing video games. I play a lot of video games, and I think that might be a low-key way to do something that's public-facing while also pairing it with something that I do anyways. So if you're watching this video, I've committed at least in some part to this goal. The next goal that I set for myself is to plan and implement an international trip somewhere I've never been before. At this point in time, I'm considering Korea and Japan for about 3 weeks in the summer, and or going to Mexico for about a week or a week and a half in the winter months, probably to a resort. If you don't know this about me, I love to travel. I love planning for travel. I love the whole experience. I've also done a fair bit of travel alone, and perhaps that's something I can talk about in a future video, but it has made me much more confident in my day-to-day life, knowing that I can go to a country where I don't speak the language, I don't know how anything works because it's a different culture, it's a different set of customs, etc. And I'm still alive, and I've at least sometimes even thrived in those environments. That said, I'm not expecting to travel alone to either of these places, but I've started some of the initial planning for both of these trips, and I'm really excited to see which or both of these trips I decide to go on this year. The next goal that I've set for myself is to be engaged with a long-term plan to live with my partner. My partner and I are in a long-distance relationship, and we've been together for several years now, and we talk about this all the time. So, without getting into the gender dynamics of engagements and proposals and all of that, I recognize that I can propose to him. That said, that's not what I want, and it's not what he wants. So, in some way, this goal isn't quite within my control. That said, it's something we check in on together all the time. So, I expect that this one will come true this year. The next goal that I set for myself is to start a master's program. If you watched the intro to my channel video, I mentioned that I'll be starting a master's program, and by the time this video is going up, I've probably had perhaps one or even two classes. Again, you wouldn't know this about me, but I loved school. I cannot reiterate that enough. If I could be a professional student, I would be. I loved my classes. I loved talking to the people that I got to talk to. I loved the entire vibe of the university campus. So I graduated with a bachelor's degree in applied science and mechanical engineering, and I'll be doing a Master of Engineering in Engineering Management on a part-time basis. If you're not familiar with engineering degrees, a Master of Engineering is typically considered a terminal degree. And by that, I mean that if one was seeking to do a PhD, for example, in engineering, then you would most likely choose to go with a Master of Applied Science over a Master of Engineering. Master of Engineering is course-based, so I'll have to complete 10 courses to get my degree, whereas a Master of Applied Science is typically thesis-based, and it's more geared towards people who foresee staying in academia. That's not where I want to be, so that fed into my decision to apply for a Master of Engineering program as opposed to a Master of Applied Science program. This has been a dream of mine for basically since I graduated with my bachelor's degree. It will be primarily funded through my employer, which will be a huge burden off my shoulders, and I'm really grateful for that. Part of the reason why it took me so long to start a master's degree is because at my previous employer, there's a bit of hem and hawing about how much could be committed to my funding. That said, at my current workplace, if it's not fully covered, it will be almost completely covered. At this point in time, I'm anticipating taking one course per semester, so I'll likely be done around 3 years from now. The next goal that I set for myself is to do a sprint triathlon. If you're not familiar with the sprint triathlon, it's about half the distance of an Olympic triathlon. And you wouldn't know this about me, but I was a competitive swimmer for the majority of my childhood, from about the age of 5 to 17, and I played competitive water polo from the age of about 13 well into university. I played varsity on my university's team. My parents were also huge into marathons and triathlons when they were younger, and my sister is actually a 2-time Canadian Olympic swimmer. So I love to swim. I enjoy biking as well. I like running a little bit less, but I'm getting better at it, and I find that I enjoy myself more as I practice. And so I'm really excited to try a sprint triathlon. I know that I can do the distances, so that's not a concern of mine, but I've been preparing myself. That said, this is one of the goals that I'm being flexible on. That's because where I live, there's one sprint triathlon that's near me happening at the end of August. If you remember what I said about the international trips that I'm planning, it's possible that I'll be away in the month of August in Japan and Korea if I decide to go during the month of August, which I suspect if I do go, that would be the case. And sprint triathlons are relatively common. They're becoming more popular. That said, there aren't that many offerings, and so I'm a bit limited in terms of when I could do one and when I'd feel prepared to do one. So if I don't get to it this year, I plan on doing one next year. The next goal that I set for myself is to put away $1,250 per paycheck into my investments. So I'm not a financial advisor. I can only tell you what I'm doing with my own money. About 6 months ago, I moved the majority of my funds from my primary bank to Wealthsimple. If you're not familiar with Wealthsimple, they're a Canadian online investment management service, and for all intents and purposes, I use them as a bank. That said, I believe there are some legal definitions about what is and isn't a bank, and so I don't think they qualify. That said, as I said, I transferred the vast majority of my funds over to Wealthsimple, and I have no regrets. I think I made the right decision for myself based on what was true at the time. I'll make a video in the future about my finances, how I came to the conclusion that I did, why I decided to move all my money. But for the purposes of this video, I have it set up through Wealthsimple for each paycheck for there to be an automatic deduction of the $1,250 out of my account. So I never even see it in my account. It automatically comes out. 40% of that is invested into the VFB ETF, 40% is invested into the VGROW ETF, and then the remaining 20% is invested into the VEQT ETF. And again, I'll go into this in detail in another video, but that's how I have the vast majority of my investments set up at this time, based on my risk level and goals for the future. I'll also mention that Wealthsimple has a referral program, and I have a referral code. So if you're interested in learning more, I encourage you to check it out. I'll have a link in the description down below. The next goal that I set for myself is to max out my tax-free savings account, or TFSA, max out my first-time homebuyer savings account, or an FHSA, and to max out my registered retirement savings plan, or my RRSP. So for Americans, those terms likely don't mean anything to you. An RRSP is mostly similar to a 401k. It's a bit different in that in Canada, each individual has their own amount that they can contribute to an RRSP. It's up to 18% of your eligible earnings from the previous calendar year. That said, there are ways in which the contributions that I make are affected. So for example, my employer contributes to a pension plan on my behalf. And so my RRSP contribution room is affected because of it. So this year, I'm able to contribute just over $17,000 to my RRSP. I've already invested about $4,500 into my RRSP, and I have the next 10 paychecks set up for $1,250 to come out of them to contribute the rest of the amount that I'm able to contribute. And then after that point in time, I'll be stopping those contributions. There are penalties if you over contribute, so that's something that you definitely want to avoid. The FHSA is a new program that was initiated by the Canadian government, where for 5 years, you can contribute $8,000 for a total of $40,000. I contributed $8,000 last year, and I've already contributed my $8,000 this year, and I plan to contribute $8,000 per year for the next 3 years. For TFSA, the amount that you can contribute changes year to year. This year, I believe it was $7,000, and I've already contributed that amount. So the next goal that is related to the two previous goals that I just mentioned is to save a total of $75,000. Between maxing out my RRSP, my TFSA, my FHSA, and automatically deducting $1,250 from each paycheck, I'll be very close to that $75K. Those numbers add up to about $65K. So there's $10,000 that I'll have to add to my investments in order to make that $75K. And I'm pretty sure I'm going to be able to do that. The last goal that I've set for myself is to build my own PC. As I mentioned, I love playing video games. That said, I've been using a laptop for the past about 15 years or so. The current computer that I have, it's an MSI gaming laptop, and it's pretty good. I've had it since about 2018, so 6 years now, which is quite a long lifespan for a laptop, especially given that I use it pretty extensively and for quite intensive activities such as gaming. There are some games that I have in my Steam library that I'm really excited to play that I think will be done a disservice if I play them on my laptop and not on a computer that has a better graphics card, for example, such as Elden Ring. So this is something that I've wanted to do for many years, and I just haven't. I think partly because, as I mentioned earlier, if my partner and I have a long-term plan to live together, that's going to involve likely both of us moving. And I think building a PC, particularly if it's going to be really heavy and really expensive and then having to move it, sounds like a bit of a nightmare to me. And so this is one of the goals that I'm going to be flexible. Additionally, because of the other goal that I set for myself of saving $75,000, I think if I get really close to that goal and I haven't built my PC, I'm going to focus on the finance goal and then build a PC in another year. If I'm unable to build a PC this year, I'll likely use the bonus that I expect to get from work next year to do so. I have a build pre-planned, and I have a fairly good sense of what exactly it is that I want to have in my computer. At this point in time, the build that I'm looking at costs about $2,000 USD, or about $2,700 in Canadian dollars. So that's a pretty big commitment, but I also think I'll really enjoy the process of building a PC. I am an engineer after all, and I think it will be a lot of fun. And of course, I really expect to love the end product, to be able to play games that I've wanted to play for forever. So those are all the goals that I've set for myself this year. As you can see, I'm mostly in the planning phase for some of them. That said, for some of the other ones that I've mentioned, such as putting away $1,250 per paycheck, I have that done automatically, so I don't even have to think about it, and I have no reason to expect that I won't continue to do so. If you like this content, I hope you'll like, comment, and subscribe to my channel. If you want to do more than that, I'll have a few links in the description for other ways that you can support. Before you go, I'd love to hear one thing that you're working on this year and why you decided to focus on that thing. I want to thank you for taking time out of your day to spend watching this video, and I hope you'll be back again soon. Bye!